Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, the mouthpiece of a diffuse network of sleeper cells spread the world over, composed of non-human animals who are biding their time and waiting for the perfect moment to strike and remove humanity from the face of the earth. We live all around you, there is no escape, there is only acceptance of the inevitable. This week's episode is on the Otherkin community, those who have human bodies but identify as non-human animals, fictional characters, mythical creatures, inanimate objects, concepts, and more. A deeply fractured and semiotically obsessed community, much of the online literature produced by Otherkin focuses on defining what does or doesn't qualify as Otherkin, and documenting the specific terms to be assigned to the varieties of Otherkin experience, including an ever more complex taxonomy of Otherkin categories and sub-categories. Such a community raises fascinating questions about the extent to which any identity is a creative act, and the implications of situating your identity purely in your own subjective experience. Before we start, I want to give a shout out to Yutz, one of our listeners and the founding member of Geography of Robots, a game development collective that released the narrative-heavy, point-and-click game NORCO. It's a fantastic game with beautiful pixel art, arresting music, and a moving story, and one that I highly recommend. I'll put the link to it in the show notes. Additionally, I've got a novel coming out in a few months called Tower, probably in November or December of this year. I'll definitely be shilling it more often in the lead up to release, so you will hear about it. Anyway, if you're ready to learn how a rainkin feels in the rain, then listen on. Enjoy. They constantly compare themselves to furries and say that they're not furries, and make very clear that furries simply like certain animals but don't identify as those animals. And they never say this bit out loud, but I always get the impression that as a result of the fact that furries don't identify as animals but Otherkin do, they invariably Otherkin writers saying these
and
things
also, isn't it funny
that Otherkin are better?
The furry community is such that even Otherkin don't want to be associated with them. Even the people who literally think they're animals are like, nah, we're better than them. Shout out to J-Man. We don't have any Otherkin on our Discord, do we?
No Otherkin that have declared themselves. Guy from Mass is also a reformed furry. So shout out to Guy from Mass. Shout out to Hagersten or Hagersten. I forget how to pronounce his name. He's not a furry. It's just I don't think we've given him a shout out before. Not accusing him of being a furry.
Shout out to Alex as well. Alex hasn't been around, but come back. Come back, man.
So, yeah, looking at the Otherkin community, I'm not sure if you've met this type of person, although I imagine you have. You know how there are certain people who are quite proud to have some sort of mental illness and will repeatedly bring it up and talk about people who don't have that mental illness.
Yeah, you and me. As very proud of being
yeah, as being in some way worse than them, and will get competitive regarding the severity of their symptoms. And when you get two of these people meeting each other, they're trying to one-up each other constantly on like how mentally ill they are.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I went to a Western university, so yeah, I know plenty of these people.
Yeah.
and in Melbourne of all cities.
Yeah. I definitely got that vibe from some of the Otherkin stuff I read, in that they'll talk about how strange it seems that particularly rarity is very highly valued in this particular community, or some subsets of the Otherkin community, in that they'll compete over having ever more bizarre symptoms of being Otherkin. They'll compete over having ever more rare identifications with animals.
Symptoms? Like, really showing
more and more bizarre
Jack.
animals.
Not characteristic symptoms.
Yeah, it's a strange community. We did read something by Steampunk Skygod, which was more reflective and more self-aware than a lot of the other stuff
really good.
We'd read.
I actually
and I found that, if not convincing, then at least more compelling. But especially trawling through some of the Tumblr pages where they're displaying as badges of honor the fact that they regularly dissociate and start running around on all fours and thinking they're a dragon or something, only to be met with comments saying, "Oh, I have this, but it's more disruptive to my life," and that carries a perverse form of social currency, I found a lot less compelling.
That's completely bizarre. I didn't know that.
Anyway,
so we should
what are otherkin?
Quickly discuss what otherkin are. It's pretty simple. Well, no,
yeah.
The one sentence summary is straightforward. It's people who identify. We're going to talk about identity, don't you worry. But it's people who quote unquote identify as some form of non-human living organism. Now, again,
living organism. Now you're wandering into an otherkin debate.
Yes, I know. We'll get into the typology of this stuff.
Because some of them say that you can identify as an inanimate object, like a rock, but then other members of the otherkin community say that that's absurd.
Which, of course, this is a debate about the logics of identifying as things other than human. So, pot
as a
call
human.
The kettle black, motherfucker. I identify as a pot, and so anyways,
and I'm the kettle.
Notwithstanding the intricacies of what qualifies as otherkin, identifying as things that are not, so presumably in some capacity, whether it's all the time or whether it's a transient thing that occurs, these people feel as though, or claim that their subjectivity changes to that of, in particular, animals, but not necessarily just animals.
Mm-hmm.
So there are also things like elfkin, feykin, dragonkin.
Yeah.
And so
and during this episode, I'm sure we'll preface so many things we say with, this is a definition according to part of the otherkin community, because this is a very fractious community. And one that is particularly interested in arguing over the intricacies of language and what you designate certain things as is very, very important. So I've seen some of them say that
they really
if
like
you identify as an animal which exists on Earth, then you're a Therian. And otherkin is when you identify as something which doesn't exist. However, some otherkin say no. If you identify as any non-human creature, then you're otherkin. And things that don't exist, well, then you're fictionkin.
Yeah.
So we can give all sorts of definitions.
For the purposes of this conversation, we're going to use the catch-all term otherkin to just refer to this entire landscape of strange identities. Interestingly, transgender and transracial and that sort of thing.
Because some of them will say like alter humanity is the umbrella
Alter
term.
humanity, that's a good way of putting it. But so like transgender, for example, is not otherkin because you're still, say you're a woman and you identify as a man, you're still identifying as something that's human. Whereas otherkin, explicitly identifying as something that's not human.
Yeah. And I did pick up on a little bit of, again, that competitiveness with some otherkin forums and things talking about trans people. Is the competitiveness of, you're a complete fucking casual. Because, you're not identifying with the gender you're given at birth, but you're still identifying as a human. This Tumblr page is for true gamers only.
You're still identifying with the species you were assigned at birth.
Yeah.
So imagine if they start doing that on birth certificates. Species assigned at birth, nondescript Homo sapien. No, not even. That's too specific. Like hominid.
No,
nondescript hominid.
Like we'll wait. We'll wait for a bit and just see how they feel.
Your body looks like it's probably a hominid, but I don't want to say that you're a Homo sapiens because maybe you're a Neanderthal.
I wonder if any of them do identify as Neanderthals.
Does that count? I feel like they're still humans.
Yeah, because interbreeding was possible. Yeah, there might actually be just some sub-community of otherkin who identify as
any
Neanderthals
Homo
and have their own
erectus
specific vocabulary.
Yeah.
So the otherkin community started out, it seems.
So wait, you could be sorry to interrupt, Jack. So you could actually be trans homo though. So I could be a Homo sapien and identify as a Homo erectus.
Homo habilis.
So I'd be a trans Homo, specifically sapien to erectus. I'm a trans Homo erectus. Levi now identifies as a trans Homo erectus. But as soon as you start identifying as an Australopithecine, then you're into the otherkin community, because we all know that hominids could not interbreed with Australopithecus. Okay, so that's the line. Really, in fact, that should just be the line for speciation in general. Could a member of that species trans into that another species and legitimately still call themselves a member of the original species?
I disagree. I think in terms of being trans homo, can you bone smash yourself into the perfection of that different species? If you can bone smash yourself into a Neanderthal, then I don't think you're meaningfully a different species. Can you bone smash yourself into being Australopithecus?
You're going to have a tough time, but you know what?
Send yourself back in time.
I think you legitimately could, if you got some femur extensions and you bone smashed enough, and maybe if you did something to your jawbone as well, you could potentially transmogrify yourself
probably need
into
to
an Australopithecus. A lot of joking. But you're going to have a tough time
a lot of bone
smashing yourself into a bonobo. So definitely bonobo is otherkin.
That is harder. Yeah, well, bonobos... I don't know why you'd want to bone smash into a bonobo, because bonobos just don't have hunter eyes. They look like prey animals. They're small. They're less violent. They probably don't have voices which have a pitch on average below 92 hertz. They're just anathema to women.
But they fuck.
No, I really think early hominids are the way to go. Anyway.
Early hominids?
That actually does. That's when pre-humanity peaked. I did read about transspeciesism, which is the distinction between that
is
and
that not
otherkin
otherkin?
is very blurry. But this group, I guess you could maybe call it a subset of otherkin, where they're more focused on the fact that, or they're trying to draw a parallel between themselves and the transgender community and saying, okay, we are a different species born into the wrong body. And some of them will say, okay, we need surgical interventions to make our external body or our exterior body align with our experience of being a different species.
Some of them get very extensive surgeries.
Yeah, it really depends on how closely related the creature you identify as is to Homo sapiens. Like, if you identify as Neanderthal, then you probably could bone smash your way there. Although, no, I think they might have had greater skull capacity than humans. So maybe not them. Maybe like Homo erectus.
Can you be
bone smash
partially
your way there.
transspecial? Do you think you can be partially
What's that mean?
transspecial? Like, I still want to be human, but I just want a prehensile tail. You know? I want to be able to like pick up a cup of coffee, sip from the cup of coffee while she's still using both hands to code. That's what I want to be able to do.
Yeah, that would
and
be
in order
really,
to do that,
really
I need a monkey
convenient.
tail. That'd be super convenient.
Yeah, I'd be all for that.
So I don't really want to be
That's my
an
political
old world
position.
monkey, a new world monkey. Yeah.
All my political positions emerge from my desire for a prehensile tail. That's the bedrock. That's the bedrock upon which my political beliefs are built.
Yeah, libertarian looks pretty good. It seems like I could probably justify getting a prehensile tail. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And the
anything
commies
that
let me
would
have a tail.
prevent me from modifying my own body, whether it's a good idea or not, is probably not a movement I could support. Anyway,
So that's
the history of Otherkin. Probably the forerunner of the Otherkin community was the Elf Queen's Daughters, which was in the early... So the Elf Queen's Daughters was a group of people who identified either with or as elves from Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure whether they identified with or as those elves, or whether that evolved over time. Or
What's the difference between with and as?
that's It's very important in the context of Otherkin because that distinguishes them from the other-hearted community. Like, so identifying...
Oh, yeah, right.
If I identify with a wolf, I really like wolves.
I see a lot of myself in them. I'm a lone wolf.
Other-hearted people are people who identify with non-human entities. And they're still better than furries because they like those creatures more than furries do. So... It's just like all these communities just want nothing to do with furries.
You start talking, you go into like a neo-Nazi conference and they're just like, yeah, we just really want to distance ourselves from the furry, so we just be really clear, this is a no furry neo-Nazi conference, guys. Like, just
the furry community
guy
is
from
just
Mass,
like
get the fuck out.
Boogeyman that every single other weird, obscure internet sub-community is kind of scared of and just wants to distance themselves from and wants nothing to do with. All the while, the furry community just keeps growing and growing and getting stronger.
So ever since Furfest 2, 2016, fucked everything up. Oh, Rainforest.
Which one was that?
Rainforest.
Was it was Rainforest the one where they all started doing nangs and shitting on the floor?
Yeah, Rainforest. Well, I think that happens actually at a lot of them, but this was a particularly well-documented one.
So anyway, yeah, the other-hearted community feels superior to furries because if it's just obligatory. If you are an internet subculture, you need to explain why you're not associated with furries. They're all terrified of being associated with furries. Everyone on the internet.
Which is totally fair. It's like even the hentai guys are like, this is not furrydom. Don't you're not welcome on our octopus hentai forum if you're a furry.
That's really throwing stones in glass houses. Yeah, so they identify with an animal, whereas otherkin identify as an animal. So other-hearted will identify with wolves, they'll love wolves. Otherkin will claim, and we'll get into this, what it means to claim something so subjectively, or to claim your subjective experience as some unimpeachable truth. They say that
objective fact.
They experience life as, for example, wolves. Or as a bird.
Yeah, just a wolf with opposable thumbs and the ability to form complex sentences.
Complex.
Jack. Complex, really complex. A wolf that can speak complex real sentence good.
The furry comics are really getting to you.
just I become FNAR. Levi is now Levi FNAR boy.
So, what was I say? Oh, yeah. So the Elf Queen's daughters. So in the early 70s, they started sending letters to different spiritual groups, covens, etc. Then you also got the Silver Elves, which were previously known as the Sylvan Elves, began to publish letters similar to the Elf Queen's daughters. And a collection of these letters were published as the Magical Elven Love Letters. And this group symbol was the heptagram, which is now used as the symbol of the Otherkin community. And that's a very distinctive part of the Otherkin community, that they're really, really obsessed with, or really focus on coming up with precise terminology and arguing over terminology and flags. They really like their flags. So the Otherkin flag has a heptagram on it. I think the Order of Nine Angles has a heptagram symbol, don't they? 09A.
No, or is
Let's have a look.
Is it a septagram? I think it's a septagram.
Order of Nine Angles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's a heptagram as well. Okay, so there's probably a significant link between the Otherkin community and the Order of Nine Angles, is what I'm seeing here.
It makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Satanic Otherkin. Do you reckon? Let's see if we can find some satanic
Nazi
Otherkin literature. Satanic Nazi Otherkin. I just love that, but just by the sheer law of large numbers, the fact that there's like 8 billion people on the planet, there's probably at least one person who's a satanic Nazi Otherkin. There's at least one Otherkin dude out there who's like sitting with his Otherkin buddies, just being like, I wonder if they would maybe Be
What
up
do
for
they
an
think of
orgy.
Hitler?
What do they think of Hitler? What do they think about Elvis? I mean, he's just like looking at them sideways. Like, when do I come out as a Nazi?
Should I ask?
Should I ask? I don't know. They've said some pretty Israel-friendly stuff. Maybe this isn't the group of otherkins for me.
Yeah, I will say overwhelmingly the otherkin community is very progressive.
Yeah, probably pretty anti-Israel.
There's Yeah, I didn't pick up on much anti-Semitism here, so that's good. That's still
Just
still
remember,
special.
you can be anti-Israel
club
without being anti-Semitic.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not gonna open that can of worms.
We will now discuss Israel for 3.5 hours. So the term otherkin originated in 1990, apparently. A person identifying as an elf named Raikanda Karate. There are a lot of apostrophes in that name because elves love apostrophes. Started the Elfenkind Digest, which was a mailing list for elves. And because the subscription was publicly joinable, non-elves also joined. They were termed otherkind to distinguish them from the elves. And otherkind became otherkin.
Were they like orc identifying?
Yeah, I mean, mustn't have been many humans. Just like orcs, urukai, dwarves. Just all of the other Middle-earth races, except humans. Maybe a few hobbits. Actually, I think a few members of the Elf Queen's daughters identified as hobbits.
Yeah. Nice. Smelly little fucking hobbits. Don't you think that if you actually met a hobbit in real life, like, you'd punch it? Get the fuck away from me. A creepy little gross little rat-like thing, smelly and just like smokes weed all the time.
I think Merry and Pippin, who were just blazed out of their minds for the entirety of Lord of the Rings.
Just kept on fucking things up. It's just like, as they're going into the mines of Moria, they took a toke, and that's why they knocked over the book into the well, because they were actually just stoned.
They were stoned listening to binaural beats on their headphones and just stumbling around the place.
Listening to binaural beats. Full of talk. Yeah, so so Otherkin, not surprisingly, came out of fantasy. But what's interesting is that it evolved to capture like other animals. But I guess one of the things they were talking about with other-heartedness is that other-heartedness, and they included, or at least all about the feeling, which is our key reference. But there's like a wiki. There's like, they've got an Otherkin wiki.
Yeah, Otherkin wiki is good for this. I can include the link to it in the show notes.
Jack, did you also trawl around some like the denizens of Tumblr to find out more? You went deep on
it
this
will
one.
surprise people that Tumblr is a place where a lot of the Otherkin community has moved to.
So like other-hearted is like even totems, right? If you've got a totem animal, so like you're from a culture that has like totem animals, that doesn't count as otherkin. Because you like those people or those families or whatever, those communities don't literally think that maybe in some circumstances, but at least the sort of stereotypical thing that you think of, like, like the coyote talking to Homer when he's on peyote is
when
it's not Homer.
When he
being
ate the really
Otherkin.
spicy chili.
Yeah. It's him just. It is so fucking good. So, back when The Simpsons was good. That is him having like a spirit guide, and a spirit guide is different to having a totem animal, but both of them are different to otherkin. So if Homer literally like came home and was like, "Hey Margie, I'm now a wolf," like, and Marge's like, "What the fuck are you talking about, Homer?" He's like, "I'm literally a wolf." I'm not. Did you eat another one of those chilies, homie? No, like, I identify as a wolf now. Please refer to me as Skyfox or some shit like that, or Grey Moon or something. Then Homer would be otherkin.
Yeah. It is interesting too. once Otherkin moved to Tumblr, and that was roughly 2011. Apparently, it was when it really, really started to kick off. It cross-pollinated with the social justice bits of Tumblr, and there grew a greater desire for Otherkin advocacy. It's something where if you truly believe that you are Otherkin and you are part of this community of people who are basically non-human entities trapped in human bodies and experiencing all sorts of... So they document different experiences that are common among Otherkin, although you don't have to experience them, like shifting, that sort of thing. If you really felt yourself to be part of this community that is at best ignored by broader society or mocked, then I suppose it does make sense that you would want to raise awareness about the existence of people like you. But the part of me that then makes me feel less generous is that the age range, I imagine, skews very young. And many of the experiences these people describe seem to be discomfort at their own bodies changing during puberty. And then they transmute that discomfort into, oh, well, I must be a dragon inside. Instead of it's like, no, you're getting your period for the first time, and by all accounts, it's not comfortable. Or my voice is changing and I'm growing taller and growing hair. That's uncomfortable. It's like, no, maybe I'm a unicorn or a raccoon.
Hey, Jack. If a 15-year-old is hanging out online on online furry communities, what do you call a 25-year-old who hangs out online in furry communities?
Groomer. What? Grooming them like a chimp.
Yeah, like a chimp. That's right. grooming them like a chimp. Hey, motherfuckers, if you're over, say, like 20 and you're still hanging out online in furry communities, knock that shit off. Knock it off.
I'm more sympathetic to the furry community after reading Jack, actually.
At least hang out in the age-appropriate things. I've heard too many complaints about the furry community. Heard too many fucking complaints about that shit. Same with Otherkin. I would be worried about Otherkin, just given that the number of people who seem to be involved in the Otherkin community seem to definitely be teenage. It seems to be strongly
like
geared towards people. You know, the thing that people, it's good to understand, hey, if there's any teenagers listening, firstly, I don't know if this is the podcast for you. But, seriously, if there are any teenagers, the problem with being a teenager is you're getting pumped full of hormones by your own, body changing. And you're also going through a lot of, neurological changes. And so there's actually quite a significant spike. I think the studies that I saw is, a lot of young men develop, say, schizophrenia when they're in their late teens. And they think it might have something to do with testosterone levels, potentially. But also you're just, quite emotionally volatile. So these are, to think that, say, Otherkin or in particular Otherkin, given that they're, as we'll talk about in a bit, there's mental illness involved with identifying as another species, that it's also tends to be, occurring for people in their mid to late teens and early 20s is also, I think, suspect, and that it's often not really a 60-year-old. It's just oh yeah, no, I've been a wolf my whole life.
Yeah. My read on it was less.
So I'm suspect.
Was less psychotic and more. It's a time in your life when, as you said, you're so emotionally labile. You haven't lived,
and your identity is flexible or changing.
Yeah, your identity is very fluid. You're trying to work out who you are. You're getting just blasted with sex hormones. And I guess maybe some people transmute that experience into identifying as a non-canon character in Harry Potter if you're fiction kin, or something like that.
Like a griffin.
And almost try to contextualize this discomfort using some alternative identity, which it does seem most people in the Otherkin community grow out of it. Like once their personalities become more stable, they do seem to leave it behind. But that's one of my guesses as to where this comes from.
I'm not going to psychologize too much, sorry, but I indulge me a little bit, please. Come on, man. We're talking about Otherkin. I'll psychologize a little bit. I wonder. I'm not going to say.
I mean, you just indulged me psychologizing.
I think I'm not going to say this applies to all Otherkin, but I also wonder when I see things like Otherkin, but also there's probably other things as well. But I wonder whether or not there's some, especially like say a strong orientation towards like any sort of victim-based ideologies like the SJW stuff, where like you can frame yourself as like fighting this bigger thing. Or like it's almost like that doesn't apply to Otherkin. What I mean is, let me get to the point. A narrative where you can like say that you're special, without necessarily like differentiating yourself through action. So like to go out and be special in the world, for most people requires that you put in 2 decades worth of work and go and do something interesting and make some meaningful contribution, or become a leader or like an elite athlete or something. And to be special actually is a very difficult thing. But if you have like an ideology or like some sort of personal narrative, such as like Otherkin, you can instantaneously become special without having to do that. And all you've got to do is start identifying as a cat. Well, for me, I identify as a cat boy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, trans-special enough, but well, I think cat boys are legitimately a non-human. The technical name for them was what were they called in Morrowind and Elder Scroll? The
Khajiit.
The Khajiit.
The
so
race
Levi
that everyone's
actually
really
identifies
racist about in the Elder Scrolls series.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of thieves. You can't trust them. A bunch of skooma drinkers. No good moon sugar smugglers.
Hey, don't talk about my people like that, Jack. You're no good, bipedal son of a bitch. All right. The Khajiit have a long and proud history. All right, we built this fucking country
of stealing everything that's not nailed down.
Yeah, the Khajiit. Levi identifies as Khajiit, Catboy Levi, and that's how I instantaneously became special when I was 16 and played too much Morrowind. Because I was like, well, I don't actually have to put in 2 decades worth of work to do anything interesting. I could just be a Khajiit.
It's a really interesting point because that might reinforce that insularity of the Otherkin community, in that to be special. So being special is contextual. And they've created a community within which a way to be special is not only to be Otherkin. So simply being a member of the community within that community confers a special status,
more and more.
as opposed to people not inside the community compared to the rest of the world. And then it might also go some way to explaining that competitive aspect of people saying that they have more shifts, or they have weirder shifts, or less common shifts, or they identify as a more
stranger species,
uncommon animal than someone else. Yeah. Because within this particular sub-community, to a degree, how would you put it? It's not a victim status. It's there is a degree of competitive suffering in that they'll combine, I've got all of these weird or these uncommon aspects of being Otherkin, and that makes my life within the broader world harder. So there is a degree of competing on how difficult you have it in your life.
The Victim Olympics. They've got their own. Yeah. They've got their own. Like, it's like the Disability Olympics. It's like, okay, well, we've got Summer and Winter Olympics, and then we've got the Disability Olympics. Hey, and shout out to Disability Olympic athletes, man. Some of them are like unbelievable. So I'm not talking shit about the Disability Olympics, but imagine then you have like an Otherkin Olympics, except instead of them doing actual sports like running around track and stuff, like instead they're competing on, well, how fucking weird am I, and how much does that affect my ability to interact with non-Otherkins?
Yeah, rarity does certainly seem to have social currency within the Otherkin community, but it's particularly rarity with respect to how difficult it makes your life outside of the Otherkin community. That definitely seems to be a prestige game, which strikes me as perverse, but I'm also not Otherkin.
Which is weird because you could literally just identify as a nudie branch or something. Like, that's pretty strange. Or a sea slug.
Yeah. Describing the subjectivity of that'd be pretty difficult.
Or a frogfish, like some strange underwater animal. Or a tardigrade. You know what? That's what I want to fucking identify as. I'm a goddamn tardigrade. I'm a Khajiit cross tardigrade.
Tardigrade.
Those things are badass.
Kleptomaniac tardigrade.
Kleptomaniac tardigrade.
Stealing other microbiological species.
Yeah, like stealing their sulfur or whatever it is those fucking things eat.
Stealing basic elements.
Going up to like sulfurites and like next to underwater thermal vents. So pushing them out of the way.
Stealing some of their heat.
The thermal energy. Just stealing their thermal energy. Literally puts a whole new spin on that whole idea of like, hey, you're blocking my sun, man.
So how about shifting? That's something a lot of Otherkin experience.
So there's a few
what were you gonna say?
characteristic themes. Yeah, so I was just gonna go off what you said. There's some patterns within being an Otherkin, like excuse me. So we'll talk about shifting, but there's these other things like the awakening itself, which we'll talk about.
Oh yeah.
And
Let's do the awakening
a few other things. Yeah, the awakening would make sense. So do you want me to talk about it, or do you want to?
Yeah, go for it.
So the awakening is literally like the event, not necessarily an event, the point at which a person realizes that they're an Otherkin. Now, at this moment, I have to highlight a key issue with Otherkin and why they identify as Otherkin and not merely just mentally ill people. An Otherkin person will have an intense understanding that they are in fact a human and that they inhabit a human body, but they have the identity, and so they have a corporeal form of being a human, but then some sort of non-corporeal form of being this other animal or other life form. And they understand that there's this dissonance and this contradiction, and in having that realization during their awakening, hey, I identify as a wolf or a horse or whatever, but I'm a horse in a human body. That's what qualifies as Otherkin. But if the person just goes, I'm a horse, and no, I'm not in a human body, I'm literally a horse, and it just starts clopping around and, shoves a horse butt plug in and is like, and literally thinks they're a horse.
We're not doing bronies yet. Hold off on that.
It's coming. Don't worry, it's coming. We've gotten some brony lit suggestions in the recommendations channel on the Discord, so we will get there. But yeah, so a brony, even the bronies are like, yeah, but we're not. Even the bronies are like, we're not furries, bro. Don't put us in that category, man. We're not furries. Like, yeah, but you're not that much better,
seems like it's a law of internet communities that they find some way to explain how they're not furries.
It's like we have contact with some alien civilization. They come down, the first thing they say is like, just so you guys know, not furries. Legit aliens.
We're not furries.
Not furries. We're not furries. We're not fucking Khajiit either. Yeah, so the awakening is the point in a person's life where they realize. So the thing is, a person might have had some sort of inclination. Maybe they really liked really, really rare meat, like blue. Or even maybe they took a real hankering for tartare. They went to France one time, went out for a romantic dinner, had beef tartare, started watching Liver King, and they're like, man, I really fucking love raw meat. I can't get enough of it. And then, you let that simmer, so to speak. Let that simmer for like 3 or 4 years, and then they might think, oh, wait a second, there's a reason why I love raw meat. It's not because beef tartare is delicious or anything like that, and it's been engineered to be tasty. It's because I actually am a wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the awakening, very important.
Yeah. And as with basically everything on Otherkin Wiki is prefaced with, okay, not all Otherkin experience this, but it might be common or it might be uncommon.
Yeah, like a sharp moment.
Yeah, in the case of the awakening, there are various ways in which it can happen. It can happen all at once, that someone just goes from feeling like a human to feeling like a non-human entity in a human body, or it might be a feeling that creeps up on them over time and grows harder to ignore. Often, they did say that oftentimes once someone realizes that they're otherkin, they also realize that they have been that way for their entire lives. So they've always somehow felt like a snake or something, but it's only now that they're becoming consciously aware of it, or they can identify what this strange feeling is. And sometimes, like you were saying with the steak, sometimes it's brought on by an experience. Sometimes there's no clear precipitating factor and they just realize that they're otherkin. Something that is not mentioned on Otherkin Wiki, or at least not in these terms, is that I imagine most of the time it's brought about by spending time in the Otherkin community. And especially if you're a teenager and you're looking for identity, you're looking for meaning, you're looking for a place to belong, some people on the internet can start egging you on about identifying as a puma or something like that. And I imagine that's a very important part of the awakening.
And of course, everybody always wants to identify something cool. You know, like nobody identifies as a tapeworm. Like they're always, it's like when people find out they had a past life. It's like, oh yeah, in a past life I was Alexander the Great or Cleopatra or some bullshit. It wasn't like
they always.
Oh yeah,
cool.
I was like a dirty serf in like Siberia, and I lived to the age of 13 before like a workhorse kicked me in the head and I died. It was like, I was a prince. Of course I was. And of course I'm a wolf. I'm not, most animals are pretty lame. Like we remember wolves and stuff because they're like interesting animals. But a lot of animals, like the vast majority of animals are probably just like arthropods, probably. Like I imagine that a good chunk of the animal kingdom by species, like how many species there are, would just be... Yeah, it would just be...
Or bacteria.
Bacteria. Which, just not even a multicellular organism. You
E. coli.
Yeah. So they don't walk around... Maybe there's praying mantis kin. Praying mantis are kind of cool. They've got that whole kung fu vibe going on. But none of them are walking around saying like, yeah, I'm a snail. I have the subjectivity of a garden snail. This is just more evidence to my point about it just being a special thing. I just want to be special.
Well, within the Otherkin community, though, you would be very special if you identified as like Campbellback or something. It's like that'd be very unusual, highly unusual.
It's like, I got a stomach ulcer once and started identifying as Helicobacter pylori. And everybody around me started throwing
wormed
up
its way into my stomach lining and into my heart.
and then my non-corporeal soul my stomach also ontologically transformed into my eternal platonic self.
Yeah. I wonder to what extent it is easier to somewhat imagine what the subjectivity is of a mammal, at least. Something relatively similar to a human being, at least compared with the rest of the organic world. It's easier to imagine that you are imagining what the subjectivity of an elk is in a human body, as opposed to, okay, what does a daffodil feel? That is an easier thing to imagining. Maybe that goes some of the way. Instead of like, I don't know, What's the subjectivity of cyanobacteria?
I'm going to sit down and try to imagine what it's like to be a daffodil. I smell so good. I'm so peaceful. I'm so pretty. Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm being eaten by a cat. Oh my god! No, it's a fucking Khajiit. God damn it!
The Khajiit strikes again.
Yeah, so it's just a little bit too convenient that everybody in the Otherkin community are being very, very well-known animals, firstly, and then just very how come none of them... Here's another issue I have with it is, how come none of them identified as an animal they didn't actually know about and is not yet discovered, and then based on their Otherkin nature went out and discovered a new species? Why is it always just animals that they happen to know about anyways? It's like, why don't you go and find a new species of deep sea shrimp or something, because you actually identify as this is deep sea shrimp at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and you go out and you go and find it. That would be impressive.
That would be very impressive. That would be quite compelling, actually.
Compelling evidence that they actually were an Otherkin.
That would be quite a compelling point in favour of otherkinity.
Yeah, so should we talk about shifting?
Shifting is, so it's the experience of non-physically becoming more like one's kin type or stereotype, etc. Oh, and your kin type is the non-human entity that you identify as. So, basically in shifting, your non-human side is expressed more. Also known as kin shifting or stereo shifting, because in the Otherkin world, everything has lots and lots of different names that people argue over at length and sometimes get quite upset by if you use the wrong term describing the same thing. And not every Otherkin experiences shifts, but these are very common. One of the most common experiences of Otherkin people. And these shifts can be involuntary or voluntary. This would be very disruptive. This sounds like one of the most disruptive aspects of being Otherkin.
And this is where I think that, okay, I'm gonna make a serious point, and then I'll make a slightly less serious point. Serious point is this does just sound like some form of dissociation or depersonalization. Like a person just sitting around playing Xbox or whatever, and then just suddenly feels like they're having some sort of strange, I don't know, flickering out-of-body experience or something. And the fact that this community is at least the article that we read engaged with mental health properly or sincerely, but by the sounds of it, other parts of the community almost treat the claims or concerns about the mental health aspects of it as frivolous, or they actually turn into a victimization narrative that you can you're just trying to make us invisible, like Otherkin invisibility or minimization. You're just trying to say that we don't exist, but we actually do exist. And but it's you're describing what sounds like borderline depersonalization or psychotic episode, and you're just calling it shifting, and you've come up with this whole internal community language to hide the fact that you're all having these depersonalization events. So that was my serious point. My slightly less serious point was, I know exactly what they're talking about, and I have actually shifted myself. I've taken enough DMT. Oh boy, have I shifted! I've shifted a very long way away from my corporeal body.
We were saying, what is the experience of being a daffodil? I feel like I have experienced the subjectivity of something even further from a human being than a daffodil. I've experienced the subjectivity of being a 12-dimensional crystal lattice spreading out over
that's what I was going to say. What about other dimensionality? What if I want to identify as just not even another object in this dimension, but I just want to identify as a different type of like because there was this one time we took DMT, I literally felt like I had the experience of being in Escher, there's those drawings where it's you're just walking horizontally and then vertically and stuff. Okay, I had the experience of being one of those surfaces. and then there were like beings walking on top of me, like using me to walk around the non-Euclidean space, and I was one of the surfaces in that
You
space.
identify
So, like,
as a surface.
in like an X-dimensional space. Yeah, so try that. How about that, Otherkin? Take that. You want to try to have a depersonalization experience? Try that. Rip your consciousness out of your body and throw it into the 12th dimension.
It's very hard to know what to make of that experience. Just becoming a smear of geometry.
Yeah, I fucking love DMT. It's the one drug that is simultaneous. Like, I haven't done it in a It's.
I don't know if I'd say I love it. I have very strong, ambivalent feelings about it.
Yeah, I see. DMT is like my ex-girlfriend. I have a kind of love for her, but I'm also deeply, deeply terrified of her and never want to see her again. I reminisce about all the great times. And then I remember, oh yeah, that was also a horrifying experience. Sorry, I was telling ex-girlfriend jokes to J-Man on Discord today. He found them funny, so try him out. I have a lot of ex-girlfriend jokes.
It's neither a step forward, back, up, or down. It's just a step through or behind.
It's a place where coordinate systems and steps and just like vectors in general don't really make sense. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think DMT is worth what? Sorry, I do not want to say anything that could be even remotely construed
You've gone off onto a DMT rabbit hole.
As prescriptive. Like, DMT, don't do drugs, kids. It's really bad for you. Stay in school, all that sort of stuff. But it also was a profound experience for me, and I'm glad that I did it. I don't know if I'll ever do it again, but I'm glad that I did it because, boy, oh boy, like, far out.
I wouldn't rule it out, but like I said earlier, there's a very strong fear element whenever I think about it.
Not that anything bad ever happened. It's just so strange. Well, for me, I don't know. Did anything bad ever happen for you when you tried it? It's just so strange.
No, because good and bad just stop being relevant. You're so far beyond those terms being meaningful at all, remotely meaningful.
Turns out Nietzsche was huffing DMT when he was writing Beyond Good and Evil. He was just like trying to say, like, no. It's
very, very intense, and that's about as much detail as you can get.
People like to ask, like, oh yeah, like, what's it like compared to acid, like LSD? It's like, it's not even the same ball game, man. Like, you just, like, I've taken a lot of acid, and and even at the higher doses of acid that I took, like in a jurisdiction where it was not a criminal offense to take acid.
In Atlantis.
In Atlantis, in Hyperborea, I took some acid, and it was a large dose of acid, and even at a high dose of acid, you still had a sense that you were like a human and you were in the place that you're physically in. Whereas with DMT, it's just like, bye-bye.
A twitching crystalline insect.
You just get blasted. Like, it's like, when you see those cartoons of a guy getting shot out of a cannon.
DMT is to acid what acid is to drinking a beer.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Anyway, so I can relate to Otherkin
instead of...
Yeah. If being Otherkin is anything like taking DMT, then I understand.
M shifts, mental shifts. These are types of shifts that are where your mental state changes to reflect your kin type. And this is where you get animalistic urges. You might have a different set of desires, or you might focus your attention on different things. Like if you're a cat, and you see birds, you're going to be focusing on them a lot more than you might if you're a human. Or you might start making animal noises or walking on all fours. Another example of a shift is a phantom shift. And these are really, really common. So there was a survey by Naya Okami in 2016, and 90% of respondents said they'd experienced phantom shifts. So phantom shifts are the experience of phantom supernumerary limbs, like feeling like you have wings or a tail or horns, long ears, or a muzzle. There are a lot more types of shifts, but mental shifts and phantom shifts are the most common, or at least the most commonly reported. There was also plurality. That was another thing that was talked about a lot in the Otherkin spaces I came across. And this has much more crossover with TikTok commodified mental illness, with the people pretending to have Tourette's or have multiple personalities within the one body and doing it to get views. So this was definitely crossing over more into a world that I think is just toxic and romanticizing mental illness. But plurality is the state of being more than one consciousness or entity in one physical body. And so a system is the collection of consciousnesses inhabiting a single body. However, some people don't like the term system and instead call themselves collectives or a group or a household, etc., etc. Again, this is a highly semiotic and hermeneutic community. They're very, very interested in the terminology used to describe their various states of being. Oftentimes, at least in the Otherkin community, a system will include a bunch of non-human entities, so like a bunch of Otherkins, and there might be a human in there as well, but not necessarily. And their personality will keep changing depending on which of those consciousnesses is fronting their body. That is, which one's in the driver's seat and speaking through their body. Yeah, did you come across plurality much?
I really like this idea. Is it called mutualism? Yeah, mutualism. Symbiosis. Yeah, that's right. Symbiosis. Mutual. You have mutual symbiosis. You have parasitic symbiosis. So just because I've been getting into scuba and just learning about different types of relationships amongst animals, you have like clownfish. They have they have a non-parasitic but non-beneficial symbiotic relationship with the anemone, as far as I'm aware, because the anemone doesn't get anything out of it. But the clownfish, so anemones are actually like poisonous, they sting, and the clownfish have evolved to be camouflaged. They look like they have the same. There's different coloured anemones and different coloured clownfish. The clownfish will adapt their colour to the anemone, and they've adapted so that they don't get stung by the anemone and they just hang out. But the anemone doesn't get anything out of it, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's parasitic species, and then there's also species pairs where they're like actually like help each other out. So I think like manta rays have this where they've got these like little fish that hang out with them, and the little fish like clean them. They clean stuff off them, but the little fish also get protection from the manta ray, so they don't get predated as much. So
like little moras or something. I think that's
that's right. Yeah, there's several different types, but yeah, that's one of the fish. Very common amongst shark-like species.
Yeah, the ones they've got like
whale
looks
sharks.
like a bike tire track on their head. Yeah, those ones.
Yeah. Really cool. So amazing, really, really interesting stuff. And we have this as well. Like we've got a whole microbiome. We've got a whole bunch of different microbia that are living inside of us that are actually like helping us digest. We're also giving them a home. So yeah, that's like really interesting. So I was thinking about this. What's it called with Otherkin? It's like they have like a spiritual mutualism between their body, their corporeal body is like inhabited by these ethereal. Well, they're not really parasites, I suppose, if they're all hanging out together, like symbiotes. Yeah, like ethereal symbiosis of some kind. And they're definitely not having any sort of like psychotic episode or anything like that. They're definitely perfectly sound of mind. But their body is just being inhabited by several other species.
Well, your point about the mutualism is particularly important with coping linkers.
Yeah. Yeah. They were actually really interesting. Coping link is
Coping link is a subset of other link. So other link and other linkers are people who other link. People who adopt voluntarily an identity as an alter human or a fictional being.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of reasons as to why someone might want to start identifying as a non-human entity or a fictional character. And they do list these, and of course they have their own terminology because of the terminological fixation of this community. So it can be an
Otherkin
S-link
positivism.
formed for the aesthetic, coping link formed as a coping mechanism, fiction link, a broad term for other links formed with fictional beings, fun link or flink formed for fun, a paro link formed as a coping mechanism or disconnection from humanity, support link or a slink formed to help support traits or behaviors. I like to on Otherkin on the Otherkin wiki, after the support link entry, it has citation needed. What are you going to cite? Stop bullshitting me. What are you citing here? It's like some dude
just
on
links to,
Tumblr
like,
saying, "Oh yeah, I decided to become a slink for this reason."
Some just dead Tumblr account that hasn't been active since 2014. So here's my authoritative reference for slinkers.
But of the other linkers, coping linkers are probably the most significant group, and just the fact that
Most maligned as well, potentially.
It's because there is this competitive aspect to otherkin or alter humanity as a whole. Coping linkers, because they chose to start identifying as a non-human entity, are looked down on by some. I also do think it's somewhat telling that coping linkers are the most prominent of the link or the other link people. So coping linkers are people who formed an other link as a coping mechanism for trauma or stress or mental anguish or any other ailment. And so that they create this alternate personality or subjectivity or being and start to inhabit that more and more as a way to cope with some sort of negative experience. And I do think that probably does say something, that is the most prominent of the other link communities. And within Otherkin, I think it's otherkinity, the umbrella term for all the otherkins. Within the context of humanity, coping linkers are quite prominent, and I don't think that's accidental.
It's people who at least have the self-awareness to say that, like, I'm unwell.
Yeah.
Well, it's just
things
the rest
aren't
of
going
otherkinity
right.
just haven't clocked in with themselves yet. That, hey, maybe something's not quite right here.
What about fictionkin? I found fictionkin kind of funny. Oh, I mean, funny. Sort of.
Did I send you the video? There's this really interesting
of
video of sorry to interrupt. There's a really interesting video. I'm sure if you just type in "what are otherkin" on YouTube. Did you watch this video? Did I send it to you? I don't think so. Where this guy who's not an otherkin is interviewing two otherkin, a dude who's an elfkin, and a guy who's a wolfkin. And the wolfkin actually blew up a while ago.
Is this the on all levels except physical I'm wolf?
Yeah, so it's that guy.
Then he starts howling.
Except it's like 5 years later or something, and it's like a new interview with him, and he's kind of pissed off about that original interview because it turned him into a meme. Which, to be fair, he brought on himself.
Fair enough.
He brought that shit on himself. I don't feel sorry for the guy at all. Like, what the fuck? Anyways, he memed himself, and but the interview is actually really nice. The interviewer is, being playful, but not bullying them or anything. So it's a nice interview, and they actually gave honest answers and stuff. But the elfkin dude, super interesting. He's undergoing substantial body modification surgeries to look more like an elf. And in particular, like a...
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of some people like that.
A space elf, such as the Elder from 40K, Space Elf vibes.
40k the Elder.
So this guy's gotten like eye surgery to make his eyes like pointier and slanty and stuff, and more. The guy's Swedish or Czech or something, you know, like his like white blonde hair and stuff. But he constantly wears contacts, so his eyes are different colors. He's modified his jawbone. He's modified his eye, the shape of his eyes. He was wearing fake ears, but he might get his ears chopped to be more pointed naturally. Yeah, these sorts of things. So just really interesting. And why was I talking about these guys? Who were we talking about? We were talking about the fiction kin. What I was wondering about when I was listening to this guy is just like, how do you know? How are you supposed to characterize this other species? It's completely made up. Where say I don't know, it's Ursula K. Le Guin story or something, or some other sci-fi story, or if it's a J.R. Tolkien like Forest Elf or whatever. Like the extent of our knowledge about those species is we know for a fact that those species don't exist. How the hell can you possibly identify something that explicitly was made up as fiction by another human? That really jumped the shark for me. I was like, this is fucking ridiculous.
Fictionkin was one of the more interesting parts of this because they also acknowledge that what's there in the name? They acknowledge that these creatures don't exist, but they also acknowledge that not merely can you identify as a canon character within some fictional work, but you can identify as non-canon characters or like side characters who are given little exposition time, so you don't know much about them, or just completely non-canon characters as well.
Doesn't that just mean you're making it up?
Which is
at that point, are you not just like bullshit?
So you know what?
Like,
it brings up the interesting point of to what extent is every identity a creative act? And there probably is. Like, there's probably a large degree of creativity.
That's a great question. We should come back to that question in a few dot points time.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, Jack. To what extent is every identity a creative act? I think there's some people with some very strong feelings about that question. I think there's quite a few people with some very, very strong feelings about that question.
Yes.
But it just seems like at least
the Fictor type stuff just sounded to me like this sounds like being a fan of some particular piece of media and just taking it too far. This sounds like BTS people, but going to... Oh, actually, no, not even going to. It just sounds like BTS people.
BTS?
Like BTS fans.
What's BTS?
It's a K-pop group, and their fans are real punishers. Just absolutely frothing at the mouth, rabid.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, hectic. I didn't know about this. So my issue is that another kin who identifies as an animal that exists in the real world can at least say to themselves and to others, look, this is what dogs do. I'm acting out, or because I am a dog, I'm making my corporeal form mimic the movements or the mannerisms of a dog. But if you're fiction kin, and especially if you're non-canon fiction kin, like if you make up a species yourself and you say it's in the Tolkien universe, it's in Middle Earth, it's like I don't know, super elf, like some sort of super elf. It's a species that Tolkien nor his sons ever put into the universe. It's not canon. And it's not even in like the Peter Jackson films or anything like that. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, it is fiction, kin. It's your fiction, but it's not. It's not even. At some point, it's just you're just creating like some sort of alter ego. Like it's just an complete alter ego. And it's not at all tethered to any... It's not even tethered to something else that's somebody that is like a part of the culture.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't really have any... I just think that that's getting to the point where I would be rolling my. If somebody actually came to me and said, "Hey, this is what I am. I'm not just Khajiit, but I'm like super Khajiit."
They're like, I loved
Like-
Fallout 3. I'm a raider.
zombie. I'm a raider.
I'm a super mutant.
I just wouldn't know what the fuck to say to them. Like, you're a what? You're a Khajiit? What's
It comes
Wait
back
up.
to Khajiit.
Can you explain this to me again? Because I still don't get it. Nah. I'd definitely beat up a Khajiit on the street if I saw one.
Is it Argonians who can breathe underwater, though? That's really useful.
So,
Yeah,
fiction kin
is...
are the worst. So on that note, should we talk a bit about the typology of different... We've obviously spoken about different types of kin, but there's actually a full-blown typology that we'll unpack a little bit more of. You're looking something up, and I'll talk a little bit. So we've got Otherkin.
I was
so
just
we're
looking up
using
because I remembered on the Otherkin wiki. Yeah, here we go. Because they talked about the reception of fiction kin within the Otherkin community. I'll just read this section to give people an idea of the sort of controversy that exists within the Otherkin community, because it's far from a unified group. Many people, both within and outside of the Otherkin belief/culture, are critical of fiction kin, claiming it to be taking things too far, role-playing, or being a copycat. These statements are typical towards the Otherkin grouping at large, but more so to fiction kin than other kin types. There are also criticisms of stealing from the author. There is some debate over whether fiction kin is considered Otherkin or not. Though under the alter-human and kin umbrellas, Otherkin usually identify as something non-human, and fiction kin oftentimes identify as human characters. Some believe they are always Otherkin. Some believe they are sometimes Otherkin, and some believe that they are never Otherkin. Even if one doesn't see fiction kin as intrinsically part of the Otherkin community, they may still consider themselves both if they identify as a non-human character or identify as another species in addition to being a human fictional character. So there you go. Not only we are somewhat uncomfortable with the idea of fiction kin.
Yeah, it turns out even the other kid are like, come on, man.
Go on, stop being weird about this.
Wolfkin is just like rolling their eyes at the elfkin. Come on. Bro.
Yeah.
We all
Couldn't
know
you have
that's a
picked
bunch
something
of
respectable
nonsense.
like being a giraffe?
Ow. Meow, 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 meow. That was me saying, stop bullshitting.
Did you read
So,
about fiction
typology.
flicker, actually? Because this goes even further.
Oh, that's what
Because
my
a fiction
ex-girlfriend
flicker
used to
is
say
someone
when I ate her
who
out.
goes fiction kin.
Sorry. I'll mute myself, sorry.
Fiction flicker. They note on the fiction flicker page on the Otherkin wiki
Tell me more.
that someone fiction
The
flickers
slickers on
normally
fiction
after
flicker.
exposure to new media that a person will come to strongly identify as someone from whatever new media is being consumed. Which is like, I don't, you know when you go and see a good movie in the cinema and you're really getting into it, you sort of wonder, it's like, oh, what would it be like to be there? That sounds, fiction flicker sounds like that just pushed further. It sounds like the experience of really enjoying a piece of media, but just going too far with it.
Yeah, way too far. Way too far.
It's interesting that with things like fiction flicker, it's considered part of their identity. However, enjoying something to a large extent and even seeing aspects of yourself in it or seeing aspects of it in you doesn't actually have to be a personality trait or an aspect of your identity. That can just be something you briefly feel and it doesn't mean anything more. You don't actually need to make it ontological. Or I imagine that maybe something that distinguishes Otherkin from the rest of the world is that for most, their media consumption is not quite as ontologically charged. It doesn't become their being in the same way.
You don't need to make it ontological. You don't need to transform spiritually into this other thing. You can just be a fan. You can just really like.
Yeah, like you can just enjoy it.
You can just enjoy it. You don't have to be it. Oh yeah. This was a fun thing to research. So I was thinking I'd talk a little bit about the typology, just to give it a bit more substantive structure. So typology of otherkin. Yeah. So we're using the loose term otherkin to capture all of these ideas of someone who identifies as non-human. Then you could say there's fictionkin, which are identifying as non-human fictional organisms. I don't even know if there's a term for people who identify as non-organism, other things like a rock. That's just like rockkin. I don't know if that...
Oh, no, I did find that. Let me just search for that. I did find people talking about this.
Okay, while you're searching for that, I'll
look for that. Then there's like people identifying as like a lamp or something.
Inanimate objects, yeah. So
yeah,
we can shout out to Jack's book.
It's a hot topic.
If
yeah, that actually does happen.
Yeah, shout out to Jack's book. Okay, so if this is in the future, if you're listening to this in the future, after Jack's published his book, go to our website, bookclubfromhell.com, and go to the About page, find Jack's links, and buy his fucking book. If we're not in the future yet, and you go to that page and you can't find Jack's link, really listen to this episode in a couple of weeks, or in a couple of months, and it'll be there at some point. Don't worry, we will be pimping Jack's book. Anyway, back to otherkin. There's Therian. Therian are otherkin.
Concept kin is a subcategory of otherkin wherein an individual identifies as an abstract concept of some variation.
I identify as the fifth dimension.
They've also got their own flag. These people really like flags.
I would identify as continuum. I would identify as the continuum.
Concept kin also acknowledge great relief when in the company of their kin type. For example, a rainkin standing in the rain.
Wait, that's not a concept though. Rain is a physical thing.
Okay, so this
I call bullshit. That's very concrete. Rain is very concrete.
I guess maybe. So you could say you just have this. Exterior to humans, there are simply events. They're not categorized. So being generous, when they say that rain is a concept, it could be that a human being overlays upon experience these conceptual categories, one of which is rain. So within that context, rainkin could be concept kin.
Nah, too concrete, bro. I'm not even a physical form. I identify as the Lorentz attractor. That's what I identify. I identify as the Lorentz attractor. Fuck you.
I want to be Maxwell's demon.
Nice. That's
foodkin,
awesome.
Foodkin is a term for individuals who identify as a type or types of food spiritually or physiologically. This is an aspect of the otherkin community that does irritate me. Oftentimes they misuse medical terminology or philosophical terminology in a way that I don't know what they mean. They really, like, as you would expect, they like phenomenology a lot, and they talk about Husserl a lot. I think, whom admittedly I don't know much about, but they particularly like Husserl's idea of noema. I think that's how you pronounce it. The problem is, among Husserl scholars, there's no consensus on what Husserl meant by that term, and the way that otherkin people use it doesn't make any sense, even within the context of the scholarly debate on what it means. It's just like, this is meaningless. I don't know what you're talking about.
Should we read Husserl?
Oh, I just don't know how many descriptions of a chair I can tolerate.
Was he phenomenology of the spirit? Or was that Hegel?
Oh, that's Hegel.
No, that was phenomenal. So I don't know what Husserl did.
I mean, we could. He's pretty, I think he's too normie for us. As in, there's people at universities study him. We exist so that people can come across unfound gems, undiscovered diamonds. People have already discovered Husserl. That's why we're reading about otherkin.
I like to think of us as the alternative to getting an arts degree. We come and get an education at the book club from hell, and you'll study all the things that the Western universities don't want you to know about. They
don't want you to know about Otherkin.
Nick Land thought he was the Dark Enlightenment. We are the Dark Enlightenment. We are telling everybody about these other ideas out there in the world. Things that you can't even find. You can't even fucking find. Like, try to write a goddamn university essay, third-year undergrad, about Otherkin. It won't happen. You know why? Because of the cultural and intellectual hegemony.
I imagine you can. Surely there are scholarly articles on Otherkin. Google Scholar. Let's have a look at what Google Scholar has to say about Otherkin.
Probably.
I'm sure. Yeah, particularly the identification stuff and the deep subjectivism must really appeal to academics. Surely there's Otherkin
or
stuff.
There'll be like psychopathology.
We are spirits of another sort. Ontological rebellion and religious dimensions of the Otherkin community by J.P. Laycock.
Oh yeah.
Alternative worlds, metaphysical questing, and virtual community among the Otherkin. D. Kirby. Handbook of Hyperreal Religions. On having a furry soul. Trans-species identity and ontological indeterminacy in Otherkin subcultures.
Contentious. Whoever wrote that paper doesn't know what they're talking about.
Man, there's so much.
Could you imagine doing your master's thesis? Doing your master's thesis on Otherkin, you spend a year understanding this crap. You know what though?
This just keeps going.
Sorry, let me finish off this typology.
We need to defund universities.
Now you're speaking my language.
It just keeps
Should have
going.
done that years ago. Jack's like freaking out. So should I sorry, I'll finish off the typology. Yeah, getting back to the typology. Therians. Therians are otherkin of real life forms, living or extinct. So you can identify as a velociraptor. That's a Therian because velociraptors exist, unless, of course, you're a creationist.
Yeah, well, they were planted there by the CIA.
In which case, you would probably then think of yourself as a theriomythic, because theriomythic is mythical creatures. And as we know, velociraptors are not real, were never real, because the world's only 7,000 years old. Or you could be...
like if I identified as a globe, as the Earth, fictionkin.
Nice. Yeah. What if you just identified as the abstract class of spheroid objects?
Identifies the flat Earth and the ice wall theory.
Therianthropy, which is otherkin restricted to purely earthly creatures. So there, we've got a bit more. We've got fictionkin, which we've covered a lot, which is imaginary life forms. Coping linkers. We've got wishkin, otherkin that intentionally identifies non-human, but not as a coping mechanism. Not as a coping mechanism. So it's like the other types of like the people who intentionally identify. So they're posers, basically. Clinical lycanthropy, which is somebody who identifies as human but believes they are becoming something non-human. So they're not otherkin. It's very important to note that if you have clinical lycanthropy, you're not actually otherkin because you still feel as though you're human, but you feel as though you're becoming like a wolf or something. So there's some... were there any other major groups?
Yeah, there were quite a few places where I read people really dismissing physical shifting or anyone who suggested that they might be physically becoming a non-human entity. That and vampires. Vampires are contentious because they drink blood.
Yeah, that's not the only reason why they should be considered contentious.
Vampirekin.
Vampirekin. Okay. Onwards and upwards, hey. We've got so that's a brief typology. That actually gets really... Look, it's like any of this what would you call it? Extreme subjectivism, especially anything around like identity politics, which we will talk about eventually, is like if you just keep on, in particular, what is it? Intersectionality. If you're like, I'm queer, mixed race, Aboriginal person, and I identify as this and I have this disability and stuff, you could probably come up with enough intersections to the point where you're literally the only person in that intersection of all those characteristics. I'm the only mixed person I know with my name. There you go. Okay, great intersectionality, very helpful. And I've been victimized by my idiosyncratic life circumstances. It's kind of the same thing, except in this case you're talking about the souls of, or like the subjectivity of other animals. Where if you wanted to, I suppose you could just identify. You could pick out like, well, maybe there's coralkin, which is all of the other kin who are actually like coral species. What about tropical coral? I still think. What about this obscure form of coral that's only found in this part of Indonesia?
If there are concept kin, then coral kin is relatively temperate, because at least it's still biological.
It's temperate, is it, Jack? It's temperate coral kin.
Yeah, it's closer to your subjectivity than that of a sink or or mathematics.
I identify as the set of all Hilbert spaces. It's like, okay, you get to sit in the corner. That's what you get to do. By yourself. So
identifies Bitcoin.
We've spoken about. Oh, fuck yes.
Levi is now Otherkin.
I'm now Otherkin. I'm pure cryptographic energy. Shifting, awakening, community typology. I am the SHA-256 algorithm. Fuck you. Shifting, awakening, community typology. Is there anything about Otherkin that we want to touch on before talking about subjectivism? Do we want to talk about the role of mental illness now?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's talk about it in the context of that article written by Steampunk Skygod, all about the weird feeling.
Yeah, cool. And then we'll talk about subjectivism. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Because the author of this particular article did talk about mental illness quite a bit.
Sincerely as well, like engaged with it as a criticism. Sincerely, which was really helpful.
Yeah. And Steampunk Skygod does identify as a shape-shifting god. Right at the start of this article, they say, I am a shape-shifting god. So their Otherkin credentials are verified, or as validated as they can be.
Which is another typology, a shapeshifter. Shapeshifters, not some Otherkin don't take shapeshifters seriously. As Otherkin want to do.
In terms of mental illness, the basic point that Steampunk Skygod makes is that it becomes a mental illness or disorder once it starts interfering with someone's life. So if someone feels like they're a dog, but that doesn't really make much of an impact on their life, it doesn't cause them distress, they're not mentally shifting and barking at people or chasing cars or something like that, then it's not, at least in Steampunk Skygod's opinion, a mental illness. It's only when it starts really negatively affecting their life that it becomes an illness. For Steampunk Skygod, being Otherkin is not innately a mental illness, but it can be one if it starts causing these real problems.
What do you think about that claim, or that, I suppose that classification?
As a general rule, I quite like that definition of mental illness, or at least part of a definition of mental illness being that it causes some sort of functional impairment.
I suppose every day billions of people walking around thinking that they're like normal functioning humans when in fact they're actually Lego people. They're actually NPCs. So yeah, I suppose I can see that. It's like not dysfunctional for most people. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just seems like one of those things where...
I don't like the increasing trend of just pathologizing all sorts of behaviors. And while these behaviors or sets of beliefs At least compared to the population average, very, very unusual. I don't like the medicalization of all aspects of the human experience. Any deviation from the normal immediately becomes some sort of pathology instead of just a variation of human subjectivity.
Any quirkiness is pathologized.
Interestingly, in this article too, Steampunk Skygod acknowledges that their experience of being a shape-shifting god is instantiated in human wetware. So it's a human brain in a human body, which experiences itself as being a shape-shifting god in a human brain in a human body. So there's some acknowledgement there that, okay, suppose I identify as a fish, then my subjectivity is not actually that of a fish. It's that of a human imagining what it is like to be a fish.
Okay.
Steampunk Skygod sort of gets at that, and that's something that I think is sensible.
So two things on that. So the first thing is, yes, good point about not just medicalizing or pathologizing every deviant over imaginative person. I think that's a fair point. But counterpoint, just seems as though like there's kind of like it feels to me like it's a bit of a technicality sort of thing. It's like, okay, so they're holding down a job and all this sort of stuff, but if the person is literally walking around thinking, I'm a dog, but I'm just a dog that happens to be corporeally instantiated in this human's body, and I'm executing this algorithm that makes me pass as a human, it sounds as though, to me, that's just somebody who has had a mental health event, a severe mental health event, and it just hasn't yet manifested. So, like, it hasn't manifested yet in the form of, like, disruptions in their life. But they're basically, like, potentially on a knife's edge of, like, okay, well, if you're already in the headspace where you think you're a dog, you're going to wake up and one day and things are going to get potentially really bad, and you should probably get some help managing it before it turns into something that could be disruptive to the rest of your life. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I don't want to demonize just having an overactive imagination, but to me, it seems as though, like, if you're identifying in that way to that degree with another, that is actually a disruptive thing. That's almost inherently disruptive. Because you're like, it is like a form of depersonalization. You're depersonalizing from your human body. Notwithstanding that I also don't want to just medicalize everything.
So it's important to draw a line somewhere, and I'm not saying that that you simply shouldn't draw a line, but drawing that line between simple overactivity or an overactive imagination and something that will lead to functional problems in the future is so difficult, because I guess at its core, the problem here is that your subjective experience is sufficiently different from your material circumstances that disconnect in your model of the world can cause problems when suddenly it doesn't correspond to the world at a moment when it really needs to, and that causes some sort of real dysfunction. Because drawing the line can be so slippery, because we all walk around with bad models of the world in our heads all the time. Like, none of us have a mental model which is directly correspondent to reality. And yes, there are more extreme or exaggerated cases, like when someone identifies as a dog. But it's the sort of thing so slippery, because there isn't really a stage qualitatively when you can say, okay, this is fundamentally different in terms of its lack of correspondence to reality, that this is something that needs treatment. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't make a judgment call as to where that line is, because there are certain cases where it's clearly in someone's best interest. So yeah, certain things, like if someone is floridly manic, it's so obviously a mental illness that is going to cause problems that you'd say, like, okay, that's well beyond the line where you treat.
Disruptive. But some people can be like hypomanic.
Yeah, even hypomania. Also, if someone has repeated hypomanic episodes, they can go full-blown manic.
Yeah. I definitely get what you're saying. I just think it just has a sense of like technicality to it, which I find is like, it's not in the spirit of like, if you actually spoke to a mental health practitioner that took their job seriously, they would be like, yeah, but we should probably sort it out now before it gets.
You should probably talk to someone about this.
We should probably talk about it, and yeah.
You should probably talk to someone in real life as well, not on Tumblr, not on some sort of internet message board. Talk to a person in real life.
Yeah, not somebody who's just going to reinforce your...
Yeah, who's just going to egg you on.
Yeah, and not somebody who's just going to reinforce this stuff. Egg you on. Yeah, don't do what me and Jack do, where we just egg each other on and then jump on our Discord, egg other people on. Yeah, go and hang out with some normal people. Oh, sorry, my phone's going off. Excuse me, sorry. Very rude. My normal phone doesn't normally go off during recording. Yeah. So, anyways, I think we're on the same page as that, anyways. But it does bring me to another point, which is that. Skygod, Miss Skygod, I assume. Not necessarily, maybe it's a Mr. Skygod, maybe it's an MX Skygod, did engage with the idea of there being a lot of mental health issues in the community, which is an astute observation, I assume.
And I'm sure there are a lot of mental health problems in the community.
Sure there is. And so, how do I put this? It's like, if you're depressed, don't hang out with other depressed people. Don't listen to Elliott Smith. Don't watch, like, fucking films that'll make you sad and stuff. Don't, go hang out with some non-depressed people. Go watch some feel-good films and listen to some sweet, sweet Mozart or something. You can definitely get into a situation with any mental health stuff where you can reinforce, and it's the same with like if you're like getting way into drugs or whatever. If you're into drugs, don't hang out with other people who are into drugs unless you just want to. So like the people that you surround yourself with will reinforce. This is why Jack and I hang out together. We just reinforce our stupidity for one another. But if you're into otherkin, say furries is an example, because at least a lot of furries they're not otherkin. And so they all know that it's like, this is play, or this is a creative act, and this is what we're doing for fun, and we really enjoy the art form and all this sort of stuff. But there's an understanding that, like, we're not actually these things. But with this otherkin community, they're all reinforcing this delusion that they're some other life form when they're not. And then they're just hanging out with other people who are reinforcing that. And to the extent that they may or may not have other mental illnesses, or if you say like being otherkin is inherently a mental illness, you're just hanging out with a bunch of other people who are not psychologically well, potentially, and reinforcing each other's beliefs, and then also getting like extremely panicky about the meanings of words and like self-identification and the legitimacy of being this versus that. And it just sounds like a fucking recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
If you ask me, like, I don't know.
It speaks to the need for ballast. So in the case of a depressed person, I think listening to depressing music or engaging with some sort of art or media that is depressing, I think if used if that's not the only thing you consume, I think it could be good. It might make people feel less alone or more heard. But it's when that's done exclusively, then it starts causing problems. Yeah. If you don't have ballast of someone who's not part of that headspace, or is not part of, if you're otherkin, the otherkin community, or if you're a furry, the ballast of someone who's not in the furry community. It's really good to have ballast from people who, they don't have to disagree with you, but they occupy a sufficiently different place that they can give you a bit of insight into where you are. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, at least have one non-otherkin person in your life who isn't just going to reinforce this. So that's the thing with all the stuff that we cover, I think, Jack, is you can definitely see... Maybe this overlaps with radicalization. We should definitely cover something to do with radicalization. But it's when people don't have any like kill switch to the headspaces that they get into. They don't have any like countercurrent or resistance. They're just like the worst forms of cults, right? It's built into sort of the way that cults are run, that they cut people off socially, isolate them from like external media and that sort of stuff. Where it's almost like your information diet and your social diet just becomes very homogenous, and it's mostly just information sources and other people who will just reinforce this one way of looking at the world and looking at yourself. And you know, as we were saying before, I guess like if it's really not disruptive to your life and you legitimately think that you're a wolf or that you have some sort of identification with a wolf, but you're still, like able to live a healthy and fulfilling life, and your friends are otherkin, I guess what's the big deal? But I guess I would be really worried if one of my friends started identifying as otherkin. I'd be legitimately worried about them.
I would say
like, okay, that's cool. Yeah, okay, can we talk about it? All right, just don't go off the just come hang out with us non-otherkin people sometimes.
Yeah. That's probably the most useful thing you can do, is to provide a point of comparison. You need a circuit breaker. Because I feel like this gets weirdest when they stop having another point of comparison, where the otherkin community or any other subgroup becomes normal and not compared to anything else. And I think a lot of these online communities do have, at least the nastier parts of them, have this tendency to encourage people to view everything outside of that community as suspect. And that's some way for that meme to try to insulate itself.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It's like there's a self-insulating like structure to the meme itself. Yeah. Yeah, it's like a tuberculosis infection.
Like a granuloma. Yeah.
Yeah, like a granuloma. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? No, but it kind of is doing that. I mean, as I said, like the extreme example is cults, but as you said, in all of these internet communities, whether it's Looksmaxes or otherkin or furries, you'll get to the deep, dark parts of those online communities, and they're essentially trying to demonize the outside world and become more insular, inwards facing. Yeah. And that can definitely take on a sinister tone, I think.
I think almost invariably when some group is telling you not to trust any part of the outside world, it's sinister. That's just not something that a good faith actor is going to do.
Unless it's the book club from hell, in which case you should ignore the rest of the world and you should come to our Discord and give us 60,000. Hey, nobody signed up.
Patreon tier.
Satan Marzano, even though he's cashed out with all that fucking crypto money or whatever he made, like fucking still hasn't signed up for the 60k tier. But if you want to be radicalized into the strange world of the book club from hell, get on our Discord. Come join the family with Jack. Mr. Jim Jones, great leader, and your God Emperor King Levi, Catboy Levi. We will help you insulate yourself from all the other meme plexes, and you can just hang out with us all day. Bunch of weirdos. Yeah, no, I agree.
Should we talk about subjectivism?
We've got everything. We've got a channel about cooking. We've got a channel about bodybuilding. We've got a channel about fashion. We've got a channel about the episodes, which are being very relevant. So yeah, it's a good time.
Subjectivism. So otherkin is one of the more extreme forms of straight subjectivism. This belief that, this school of thought that holds that your experience is, in some sense, an infallible source of truth, in that the fact that you experience something is true. Whether that thing experienced is true or not is open to discussion, but the fact that you are experiencing it validates it to quite an extent. And you also can't disprove that someone is experiencing it. And I think that's the basis of Otherkin, where they say, well, I experience the subjectivity of a wolf, and you can't disprove that.
Yeah. So when a philosophical school, or in particular when... Well, this is why epistemology is important, and why I guess I'm glad that I talk about epistemology quite a lot on the podcast, is because I think it's the field of philosophy that cuts across like pretty much every other field of philosophy. And with subjectivism, so one of the key questions in epistemology is like, how do we know what's truth? What is truth? How do we create new knowledge? What are the sources of truth? How can we detect error and that sort of stuff? And in subjectivism, essentially the source of truth is the subjective, like the point of view of the actor making the claim. At least with regards to subjectivism, claims about oneself. And so maybe it's not subjectivism with regards to like claims about the outside world, but certainly about claims about oneself. And I guess where my issue is with otherkin, and I suppose self-referential subjectivism in general, is that how do I put this? Is that we can be mistaken about claims about ourselves. And we do it. It's actually a fairly trivial thing to say.
Exactly.
We can do it all the time. So
it's like you can be wrong about what you think about yourself.
Yeah, you like on any particular day. Like the classic example is dude's playing Xbox and his girlfriend interrupts him to just have a normal human conversation about something in the real world, and the guy flips out and is like, "Don't interrupt me! I'm playing fucking Call of Duty or whatever. Just about to snipe someone."
Almost got a chopper gun at you, bitch.
And she's like, "Don't yell! Don't get so angry!" And then he's like, the boyfriend, and says, "I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm not fucking angry, man. I'm not angry.
I'm fine."
Yeah. So that person is obviously angry and is not fine, and they're mistaken about themselves, and it's just a matter of them not realizing that they're angry. And it's a very trivial example, but it just goes to show that we can easily be mistaken about something as apparently personal as our own emotional, like claims about our own emotional state. So it's definitely the case that we can be mistaken about ourselves.
To the point where you truly can angrily think that you're not angry.
Yeah. And another classic one is like people who are depressed who don't realize that they're depressed. That happens all the fucking time. So like, and I mean, another really classic example would be like literally people who are in a psychotic episode are also making claims.
That's the more extreme case. Yeah.
That it like, so it's not even a controversial thing to say that we can be mistaken about ourselves. And so any subjectivism, in this case otherkin, where you make a claim like I identify as, or I literally am a dog instantiated in a human body, you're making an objective claim that implies a number of things about physical, about the reality outside yourself. Like, for example, that dogs have subjective experiences, which, we don't have a theory of subjective experiences. Like, it could be the case that dogs, as counterintuitive as it is, it could be the case that dogs don't have a subjective experience. Whilst we don't have a theory of qualia, we actually don't know if dogs have subjective experiences, but let alone that those subjective experiences can be extracted out of the body of a dog and transplanted into the body of a human. So that subjectivism, if you subscribe to subjectivism where the authoritative source of knowledge is that of the actor making the claim about themselves, then you literally can just open yourself up to anybody can make any claim about themselves, and you could say, I'm fucking Superman and I can fly, bitch. And it's like, well, it's in the world of subjectivism, it's like, yeah, sure, you're fucking Superman, jump off that building, have fun. So to me, it just leads into complete chaotic thinking. Sorry, I've got on a fucking rant here.
In the case of Otherkin...
Sorry, I'll shut up.
In the Superman example, I guess an Otherkin would say that they make no claims to physical transformation. So maybe they might have the subjective experience, suppose if they're birdkin, that they feel distressed because they know they should be able to fly. They have the subjective experience of a being that can fly, but it's instantiated in a physical body which can't fly. Where I think they go wrong is they take, okay, I strongly feel that something is the case. We don't have a way to verify that, but I'll take their word for it. Okay, you do feel that way. However, to make the jump between I strongly feel this way and I am the subjectivity of a bird in a human body is not as easy as they make it out to be. Those are actually two different things and they make them out to be the same.
And so this brings us to a very famous book in the philosophy of mind, not famous book, it's a paper, very famous paper in the philosophy of mind, called To Be a Bat. I believe that's what it's called, To Be a Bat. What is it like to be a bat? And it's a really interesting article. Basically wondering, the author says, what does it mean to be a bat, to imagine being a bat, to try to transpose one's own subjectivity into the experience of a bat? And there's a lot that you can take out of it. I'd recommend reading it. One of the things I took out of it is, or in thinking about it for myself, is like, is it even really possible to inhabit the experience of being a bat? Aren't you really just imagining yourself just doing bat things? Like it's still your subjectivity. It's just you're upside down in a dark cave. Because what do you mean unless you're on DMT, you don't know what it's like to be echolocating things.
Yeah. Well, you're experiencing a human imagining the subjectivity of a bat.
And it's almost like this, you can't really get out of this, as far as I'm aware. Maybe somebody has figured out an argument to get out of this, but I haven't seen it yet. So it's like, if you claim I'm a bird and my body does not correspond to my subjectivity of a bird and I'm distressed, so I have like some sort of spatial body dysmorphia, then I need to modify my body. So I'm going to start implanting feathers or something. Or like getting tats on my face to like look like feathers, or I'm going to graft on some angel wings onto my back, something like that, like some gratuitous body modification. It's like, well, why don't we just start from first principles? What do you mean your body doesn't correspond to your identity? Like, what is identity, and why does that... what if your subjectivity is the authoritative source of truth, why don't we use your body as the authoritative source of truth? Why don't we say your body overrides your subjectivity? And say that, no, you have to make your body, you need to rethink the mistakes in your thinking, and maybe just actually the issue here is not that your body's out of order, it's that your mind is out of order. That's where the issue is.
Yeah, well, that brings up another fundamental... It's not necessarily a problem, but it is an assumption in Otherkin, where the assumption is that because they subjectively feel to be a non-human entity, I should care, crudely. So suppose, for argument's sake, they definitely identify as a turtle. Why do I take that seriously? And I think that's an assumption that I should take it seriously. But it's not clear to me why I should.
Not only that you should take it seriously, but that you should affirm it, Jack. Like, if Levi is Jeet Levi, Catboy Levi, and now I'm saying, you, Jack, you have to respect that and like actually say that you believe that I'm a Khajiit.
You're clearly an Argonian. Big
Fuck
lizard
Argonians.
man.
Ugly, cold-blooded little roadkill skinks. I'll fuck them up. I'll eat them.
Black Martians suck.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so somebody else makes a claim
yeah.
about their subjectivity, which is wrong anyways, but let's just say, so one is based on a philosophy of, authoritarianism, like epistemological authoritarianism, but the authority is the subjectivity of the actor. But then also they want other people's perception of them to conform to claims about themselves. So I'm an Argonian, I'm a Khajiit.
Yeah.
I'm a cat. And then I don't know if Otherkin, I assume there are Otherkin who literally, in their most extreme form, like literally want other people to affirm their otherkinity.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Well, that's to a large extent what otherkin advocacy is for. To make them both more visible and more accepted in broader society. But again, I think it's an assumption to ascribe moral valence to basically other people agreeing with your inner experience. I'm not sure why it's actually a moral action to agree with that. It's a massive... It's an unstated first principle, which is so fundamental to this entire project.
And it completely obliterates an error correction.
Yeah, no, you just have to agree with me.
Like an intersubject. So it's like, what's the point of having discussions with another person at that point? It's like, if you just say like any of my claims about my own subjectivity, like my social environment must conform to my claims about myself. And to do otherwise is somehow an affront or an offense or even like a victimization because you're minimizing my experience or you're making me invisible. That's somehow...
Yeah. Well, I think it goes beyond that. It's not only an affront or an offense, but I think it's seen as an immoral action.
Yeah, an immoral action.
Within this paradigm. That it's actually ethically bad.
It's well, in the
That's actually not a moral claim that I really accept.
Oh, absolutely.
Or at least I want to know why.
In fact, I'm sure there's other kin who would like to make it illegal. Who would like to make it illegal to misspecies them. That if you say that I'm a species other than the one that I identify as, that you're actually out of line and I'm going to take your job because of that. I'm going to take you to the... here's the thing about the otherkin is that they can't really go to the Human Rights Tribunal, can they? You know what? That's a good point.
Checkmate.
I'm going to start... Take that, you cunt.
It's a self-limiting group. I don't feel like I have a great deal more to say about otherkin. Do you?
No, I think I've said my piece.
It's harder to say if we'd recommend this or not because we didn't cover a specified text so much this episode. If people want to look into the Otherkin wiki...
Well, there's all about that weird feeling.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, on the website I put all about the weird feeling.
I'll include a link to it in the show notes. Like if you want to know about Otherkin, reading the article by Steampunk Skygod is a pretty good primer, and Steampunk Skygod seems a lot more self-aware than many of the other people in the Otherkin community whose posts I've read. So yeah, if you're wanting to learn more about Otherkin, that's a good spot to start. What do we have next episode? Do we have Mine Were of Trouble by Peter Kemp?
Hey Jack.
Yeah.
What do you call an Otherkin who really likes to read? Bookworm.
Oh my God. Do we have Mine Were of Trouble by Peter Kemp next week? Or is it a Q&A?
Yeah. What do you call an Otherkin who sells weapons and arms?
Stop it.
War dog. A war dog.
I just think of Zillakami screaming war dog whenever I hear that term. Him barking.
Okay, I'm all out of Otherkin jokes.
You're out of
we need
Otherkin jokes.
to do a brony episode, and I am going to trot on into our brony episode, carting along
bronies
a
are
whole
just-
bunch of dad jokes on
They're just
bronies.
so gross. Bronies are like much worse furries.
Yeah. They're the dudes who got kicked out of FurryCon. Like, fine, I'm gonna become a brony.
No, but I'm pretty sure next week we're doing Minor of Trouble by Peter Kemp, which is quite different to Otherkin or to bronies. Some English guy went to fight for the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War and wrote a book about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we should wrap up then. Join the Discord.
Yeah.
Check out the
let's
new
wrap up.
website.
Join the Discord.
Do all that sort of good stuff.
Buy my
Otherwise, stay
book
tuned
when it
for
comes
next
out.
episode. Yeah, when it comes out. It'll be out eventually.
All right. See ya.
Bye.